Welcome to the Mama Shoshana channel. I am Shoshana Mizell, and so happy you're here today for this podcast. If you could be so kind as to subscribe, like, share, and comment if you feel you're inspired to. So very quickly, today's subject matter is going to be something that is pretty revealing about my life. And the subject matter is, why do we get into multiple relationships that we are committed to, or we marry the person and realize slowly that subconsciously we were getting into a relationship that was doomed to fail? What are the workings of that? Where does that come from? What are we trying to fix time after time after time again? And I thought that would be a great subject matter because it's something that I've been through, and it's got to be something that many, many other people have been through. So we're going to touch on a lot about my personal life, my past, and hopefully that will help anyone else out there who's been through this. So hang on, we'll be right back. Okay, so welcome back. By the way, today I'm doing my podcast from my office. So again, let me start from the beginning. Why do we often get into committed relationships or multiple marriages when we really feel inside that this is probably not going to work? Or even deeper, subconsciously, it's not going to work. We may not be aware of it, we may not be conscious of it, but we get into a committed relationship anyway with a person who is just probably not going to work out. Where does that come from? So again, I'm not an expert. I'm an only expert at my life and what I've been through, and I want to share that with you. So the first thing that I thought about was that each marriage I had, and I had 5 of them, yes, 5 marriages, that I was trying to fix something with each marriage. I was trying to, number 1, be happy. Number 2, trying to have a long-lasting marriage. I took very seriously the vows that I took of marriage, and I thought that, well, this one's going to be different. This one's going to work out because I'm healthier now, and this person and I are more compatible, so this should be it. What I realized in retrospect is that I was marrying a different aspect of my mother and father. So going back quickly to my past, when I was 8 years old, my mother took her own life. And before that, I saw a lot of fighting, a lot of drama, a lot of violence, unfortunately. And that was very traumatic for me as a child. With my father, my mother and father had divorced when I was 2.5 years old. And though I don't remember that, from the age of birth to 5, a lot of the experiences we have really dictate and develop our brain and our responses to the world around us. So my dad had abused me on many different levels, and he wasn't there very much. There was an issue with my mom allowing me to go to visitation to see my father. My mother remarried, and that marriage was really chaotic, a lot of drama, a lot of fighting. So I did not exactly have the best examples of what a loving relationship was like between a man and a woman on a romantic or, intimate level. So that might have been part of what set me up to constantly look for different personality traits that my mother and father had in different husbands, and not consciously, purposely marrying that person because of that, but subconsciously just continuing to follow that pattern so that I could somehow fix that person and therefore fix myself, not have a marriage like I saw my mother and father have, or my mother and my stepfather. And so I wanted to talk about what each marriage was like, what characteristics that particular person had that reminded me of my parents, and how I tried to fix them in order to fix me, and it did not work. So I'm going to start with marriage number 1. Here we go. Okay, first marriage. I was 23 years old when I got married for the first time, and the man that I was to marry was very creative. He was a musician, he was a singer, he was extremely enigmatic, had a kind of larger-than-life presence on stage, and that was very much like my mother and father. My mother and father were both very artistic. They were very talented, and they were actually really great at what they did. They also had this larger-than-life personality about them, and I would look up to them. I thought they were great. I wanted to be just like my mommy, and my father could do no wrong. The part of my first husband that reminded me a lot of my mother and father was, well, with my mother, was this violence, and with my father was not physical violence, but verbal violence. A lot of verbal abuse, a lot of screaming, a lot of rage. And so I found those 3 things, the physical abuse, emotional abuse, and this larger-than-life talent, all in one person. And believe me, I am not a victim, and I was not a victim back then. I definitely participated in everything that went on. You know, just staying in a marriage where I was being abused was part of me participating in it. Whether I realized it or not, part of getting healthier was realizing that I was participating in it. And that's what gave me strength to be able to get out of it. So that was the first marriage. And the funny thing is, the thing that was a catalyst for me getting out of that marriage was we had a son. And when our son was about 2 years old or so, my husband at the time was physically abusive to him. And I actually called my father. I asked him if I could take my child and leave and go live with my father and my stepmother. And he said yes. And I got my son out of that dangerous situation immediately. And that often happens when someone abuses the other parent. The children often can be next. Not always, but that was my situation. So I went to therapy after I left that husband, and I actually even tried to get back with him, thinking that things would change, which is a big part of that trauma response, is just being in denial, you know, wanting to go back, being addicted to the drama, and also just being comfortable with the familiarity of dysfunction. So I eventually was able to completely disengage from that relationship, keep my son healthy, keep my son from any kind of physical abuse. And actually that husband kind of just disappeared. He remarried and tried a couple of times to talk to our son, and then just really didn't make much of an effort. So that was the end of that one. Very fortunate, because things don't always end so nicely, so easily, where the abusive person just kind of goes away. And it just made my life and my son's life so much better because this person did kind of disappear and never tried to bother us again. So that is my experience with my first marriage. And if you have any questions about that or any thoughts about that, please leave a message in the comments, and I would be more than happy to open my heart to you. I want to be available because I know that as a young woman going through this, it was really, really difficult for me. I felt a lot of shame. I felt like I just did not want to go through what my parents went through. My mother had been married 3 times. My father had been married 3 times. And I thought for sure I will never do what my parents did. I will get married once and that's that. And, but I had no control over how the trauma had manifested in my life. And we do the best we can with what we have. So if you're in this situation and you're feeling bad, please give yourself a break. Forgive yourself. Go get therapy. Get the help that you need and start developing a relationship with yourself. That is one of the most loving, courageous things you can do. So the next portion will be on marriage number 2. So stay tuned.